Okay, super. Well, hello everybody. I'm Chris Warwick, CMO for Pod and STEM Connector, and I am joined today by Mr. Chris Ott. You get the presentation of the Chris's. The other Chris heads up our product development for Pod. We are super happy to be hosting this breakout session, and as a matter of fact, we have several of our other colleagues from Million Women Mentors, STEM Connector, and Pod joining us. So I'm hoping at the end of the session we'll have some time for some Q&A, have some good dialogue around how to use Pod. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. So welcome to How to Grow Community with Pod. If you were able to catch the morning sessions, which I just really feel were absolutely fabulous, Joe's interviews with all the people were great. Sheila had some great interviews as well. But of course, my absolute favorite was the conversation with Valerie Jarrett this morning to really kick things off. And, in Valerie's interview, she mentions relationships are the elixir of life. Thank you very much, Valerie, for that wonderful quote, because I think it really sets the stage for what we're going to talk about in this breakout session, which is how to grow community with Pod. So we're going to go through a few slides, kind of give you some background, what is Pod, how we envision it can be used for growing the Million Women Mentors movement. And then my colleague Chris is going to give a live demo so you can actually see how to get into the app, actually set up a Pod, and start a community of your own, which is super exciting. And then hopefully at the end we'll have some time for some questions. So here we go. Hopefully everybody can see the screen and the slides. Okay, what is Pod? Pod is a next generation social media app. And the cool thing about Pod is it really runs off of interests and location. Those are really the two factors that really enable people to start communities, grow communities, but also find each other, right? And connect based on a common interest. So as you can see here, the visual on this particular slide is actually a screen from my phone. These are some of my pods that I have tracking right now. And I literally have, I don't know, I probably have close to, 50 pods I've got going right now. But pods are really communities based on subject matter or geographic location. So you can think of them as groups, as forums, as ways to have immediate conversation with other people around a very specific topic. They can be professional or they can be social. And as a matter of fact, if you go out to Pod today, you'll see all kinds of pods around professional groups, industry groups. I belong to a marketing group, several marketing groups actually. But you will also find communities around a specific location, right? These are people wanting to have a conversation about something going on in their community. Maybe it's Los Angeles, right? I live in Austin, Texas. We've got lots of pods around topics that have and are very specific to our community here. So pod networks can also be public or private. And as we go through the demo, will show you the difference between a public pod and a private pod and how you would set those up. But basically the way to think about it is a public conversation where you want to invite other people with similar interests to join in the discussion, the conversation. Or a private pod where you may want to limit who is engaging in that conversation to very specific people or people you want to just control and invite them to come in and join your discussion. Private pods are great for work groups. Private pods are great. I'll show you an example how we see using it for Million Women Mentors here in a minute. Again, very specific group of people. Private pods are great for families as well. So there's a lot of applications, and the platform is really nice and flexible where you can designate whether you want a pod to be public or you want it to be private. And then I think the really cool thing about Pod and the platform and why I think it's so important to the conversation we're having today about growing community and growing the movement for Million Women Mentors is that the conversations on Pod are ongoing in their real time. And I think that that's super important. So when we think about community, this is really like so cool to me, right? This is the definition of community, right? A group of people living in the same place. And that's really what POD is all about, with its geolocation features to identify people who are in proximity to you or people who are just in a specific location in general. And that could be anywhere around the world. So I like to say it helps you connect with other people, meet new people across the world or down the street. It's really, up to you where you want to go find those connections. And also POD is community, and community is about, people who have a particular characteristic in common or an interest. Again, that's what we're about. We are community. And we are mobile, and being mobile is super, super important. So if you think about how you're interacting with social media today, there's lots of platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, kind of traditionally, desktop applications. Now those can be accessed from your mobile device as well. But we were really like born on the mobile device. That's what we're all about. And the fact that we have that immediacy of interaction is really super important, and I think really generates more meaningful engagement and communication with other people. So why is mobile important? It's important because there's 3.5 billion smartphones in the world today. And in the United States alone, 77% of us are on mobile. So when you think about, growing the movement, when you think about creating community, there really is no other convenient channel or device other than connecting with people on their smartphone. As a matter of fact, 70% of our digital engagement time actually happens on our phone. So I think increasingly we're going to see more engagement is happening on the mobile device than it is the desktop. And right now, on average, we're spending about 3 hours a day, looking at those phones, engaging in text messaging, maybe even, managing our email through our mobile device. So it really is the perfect channel for growing community and engagement. So we have some ideas about how we think we can really leverage POD for growing the Million Women Mentors community. Again, it's the perfect platform to do so. So I thought today I'd walk you through a few examples of how we're thinking about it and how we'd like to put this into practice. So I actually am going to use an example for one of our state initiatives. So here I am going to talk about how Million Women Mentors Vermont would go about setting up and building community using POD. Now, a couple cool things about Vermont. Number one, Chris Ott is sitting in Stowe, Vermont right now. So I thought that was awesome, a really great choice. And secondly, I didn't want to pick a state where I might have somebody on the call who was like, hey, that's my state, and whatever. So actually Vermont is in need of some MWM leadership. So if anybody on the call is from Vermont, please follow up with us after, because we would love to help you set this up. And get community started in Vermont. Hopefully we'll make that happen here real soon. So let's just use this as an example. So we have a state group, a Million Women Mentors Vermont initiative. And how would they think about growing community on POD? So it's very easy. You would download the app. A state leader or somebody on the steering committee would go out, very easily create a POD and call it MWM Vermont. Now, if I have other state leaders or state steering committee members on the call, we'll be talking some more about this at the state level. We'll help everybody get set up and assisted with this. But I think it's a really good example to kind of wrap our heads around how we would use the platform. So easily set up the POD, and then it's really time to start to engage your community, right? So let's think about who would be, or what are the different communities or groups that we would want to have on our MWM Vermont POD. Well, state leaders, right? So anybody who's on the state leadership committee would be on our POD, and we would send them an invite, right from our mobile, right from the app. We would send an invite to our state leaders. We would include all of our steering committee members. This is great. Any given point in time, if we want to make announcements, we want to coordinate meetings or conversations, we can easily do through the POD. and everybody who needs to know about what's going on will be immediately notified and can engage in that conversation real time. But what about nonprofit organizations, right? Let's invite all of our connections or our contacts with those folks that are operating the nonprofits, the girl-serving organizations. It would be great to have them in the pod. Now we can let them know of key initiatives. We can coordinate on opportunities. So we definitely want to have those girl-serving organizations represented in the pod. STEM-related institutions, right? I've seen a lot of engagement from museums, science museums, other STEM-related institutions who are getting involved in the movement across all the states. So yeah, we want to have those representatives included in our pod as well. And I've just pulled some examples from Vermont. Chris, I don't know if any of those are familiar to you, but pulled some real Vermont examples that we want to have join our new community on pod. Corporate partners, super important. Corporate partners can be participating in the conversation by providing announcements of things that are going on. Maybe they're sponsoring some mentoring days. Maybe they're sponsoring some other activities at their company that the Million Women Mentors, the movement, can take advantage of, and really, invite some women and girls to participate. Mentors, maybe there are a group of mentors, or there's some really key professionals that are very active in your state, and who are, always ready to step up and contribute to, activities and engagements that you have. Invite them to the pod. Invite them so they can be part of the conversation and know what's going on all the time, and just really stay abreast of things that are going on. And then finally, let's invite some of our contacts at post-secondary institutions, right? Again, there could be opportunities, engagements, initiatives that are going on, either the movement throughout the state, or maybe they have some things going on at their institution that would be really awesome if we kept the rest of the group apprised of what's happening there. So honestly, it really couldn't be any easier than just setting up your pod and thinking through who are the contacts, who are the key people that you want involved in your real-time conversation about mentoring across your state. So again, here's just another example. This was also, just a screenshot from my phone. Announcements is a feature, and I'm sure that Chris will kind of cover off on this in a little bit more detail, but I wanted to just point it out because I think announcements is one of the really amazing key features that really brings the immediacy and the real-time communication to light. So in this particular example, you can see all the pods that I follow, there's been some announcements going on. So you see MWM Vermont was making announced there about a mentoring symposium. Actually just pulled that from somewhere, we made that one up. National Day of Design, I got an announcement on what was happening with the Virtual Voyager program, and then you can see I have a little company announcement. But announcements allow the host of the pod, so our state leaders or state leader who's hosting the Vermont pod, now has the capability to instantaneously get announcements out to all of those members within our group, right? So maybe there's an event happening, or maybe there's a meeting that we really want to get everybody to participate in, or maybe it's a call for volunteers. Could be a number of things. Really puts the power of engagement and communication right in the palm of your hand as a state leader or whoever's hosting that pod to really like immediately connect and engage the audience that you want to have that conversation with. So it can be extremely powerful tool. Again, couldn't be easier, folks. Super easy. Get the app. It's free. It's available on the App Store and Google Play. You can search for Pod Network or Pod. It'll pop up. Download the app. It's free. You go on. Chris is going to show you here in a minute how easy it is to set up a profile and really get things going. Create the profile, engage your audience, invite them, make sure you use MWM if you're going out there to set one up for your own personal use, or if you're doing it on the behalf of a state initiative, add MWM tags to your profiles. We're going to show you why tags are important here in just a minute. And then again, just invite people to the conversation and get started. It's there, it's immediate. It is really a super great way to start and build a community. And then from there, if you really are interested in growing that movement and growing that community, you can work with your group to say, hey, let's invite other key players into the conversation. And if it's a public pod, anyone who's out there looking for MWM conversations can potentially join. I think it would be amazing. We do plan to leverage the platform for keeping up to speed and doing announcements on what each of the individual states are doing within the movement. And I think it'll be very, very powerful, and more to come on that. We'll be providing some information. I also want to mention, as a follow-up to the breakout session today, we do have some reference material on tutorials and how-to. Happy to share any of that information with you, so you have some reference, so we can get that into your hands following the summit today. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them and help you get started. I think now we're going to move over to some demo time with Chris, and he's going to take us and show you guys how to get into the application and actually start a pod. And then we should have plenty of time for some Q&A, and please bring on the questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you so much, CW.
And I'll stop presenting. Hold on. Okay.
If the host would kindly allow me to share my screen.
Let's see. How's that?
Does
that work?
No, it still says host disabled.
You probably need is
Oh, here we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, CW. I'm very glad that CW used Vermont as her example, so I had to do a quick change of gears here. I was gonna go big and go for Massachusetts, big as far as New England goes, but I'll stick to Vermont too. So everybody is familiar with the App Store if you have an iPhone. If you have Google, it'll be the little shopping bag, the Google Play Store. But that's where you go to get all of your apps. As CW said, you can just put in, for example, you could just put in Pod, and we're actually the second one down here, and you'll be able to just click Get. If you are if you're a big fan of precision, you can put in Pod Network, and we will be the first result. So you can click Open and get that. Same thing with your Google Play Store. You'll be able to do that. So go ahead and download the app. It's free. And I am going to jump into Pod right now. So the first thing you'll notice about Pod is that it looks a lot like your iPhone or Android desktop, except instead of applications, you have communities, which CW so eloquently defined. These are people with shared interests living in a particular place at a particular time, even I'd add. And you can see here that I have several different pod groups that I'm a part of, many of them related to what we're doing here today in the movement and why we've come together. For example, we have one here for the summit. And so the first thing you want to do when you see these is, if you're like me or like a kid in a candy store, you want to tap them. So let's just tap one and see what happens, right? So I actually can go right into the conversation that's been going on all day today. And I think CW stressed something really important about community. And it's the importance of community. And really what Pod aims to be is to bring the community to the forefront. So there's a bunch of behemoth social media apps where groups are buried somewhere in there, but it's not, it's just an ancillary part of the experience. Pod, we really try to bring people together and make it very easy to create community. So whether you're doing an event or it's a movement or it's something for today, tomorrow, or all time, you can always come up here and tap the people at the top and see who's joining, and always get in touch with them. So imagine you see a great speaker and someone like Olya makes a comment that you find interesting or intriguing. you'll always be able to connect with them. And in that sense, once the seed is planted, you always have that community you can go back to. And I think that's really important. You don't necessarily get that with an email chain or being buried on some large social networking app. And there's a lot of neat things that you can do with this community that I'm going to show you here in a second. But actually, since CW gave the example of creating your own community, let's do something a little unorthodox and start by showing you how easy it is to create your own communities. So if I tap Create Pod at the bottom, this nice big blue button, I can actually create a pod. I'll create a pod right now for our example, right on the live demo, because it's that easy. Like I said, my original plan was to go with Massachusetts, but I think CW was probably more predictive in knowing that Vermont would be novel for everyone, so I'll go with Vermont. And we certainly could use more help with the movement here. And let's just say that I want to bring people together around STEM. For this one, I will just call it MWM Vermont. It could be Vermont Mentors. I mean, it's really, there's no limit to what you can do with these. And you want to add some interest tags that are relevant to the group that you're creating, and you'll see why in a second. For example, maybe we might want to call this a movement. I'm just, doing this extemporaneously really quick, but we might do women in STEM. It's about you and what makes sense for your community. And then maybe we do mentors. And the purpose of this group is to bring women in rural communities together around STEM. And fun fact, my wife is actually a female scientist in Vermont. All right, so if I tap next, as CW said, you have two choices here on the public facing app. You can have a public pod, which means that you'll be listed in the discovery area down here. And you also have a private pod, which won't be listed down here, but it can be shared via link. And if you're one of our enterprise customers, you get a whole other suite of features, such as truly private locked pods where you decide who's in the pod, which is a little different than unlisted. Unlisted just means that we're not going to basically advertise it. And as CW said, it's great for enterprises to use those features. But if I tap next, my community will have been created. And if anybody was counting, I took that pretty slow, and that was probably like 10 seconds. I mean, excuse me, probably like 3 minutes. So if you take a look here, you actually could see that I can invite people from my phone contacts if I want to just get the pod started. And there'll be other ways to share that I'll show you here in a second. I can tap the plus person button. Actually, everybody that's watching this demo could just open up the camera on their phone and put it right over this QR code, and they would also be able to join. And you can also share from your share sheet on your iPhone. So let's get back to this pod over here that I just created, the Vermont MWM pod. And really 2 minutes, now I have a community. I can use this whenever I want. I can, so when you go into a pod, you're asked if you want to share the tags that the host created. I'm the host because I just created the pod. And what's really neat when we get to the profile is you'll see how important that is to creating profiles and connecting people around the world. So I'm going to add these tags to my profile. And it creates a lot of social capital for your organization, because now everyone who joins your pod is also walking around with the interest tags associated with your organization. And we can see here that Olya, who's on this call, has joined, so has Corbin Kezar, and people are joining right now. They can add photos, they can add media, and they can really join in the conversation. I could share this. Looks like Dane has joined. I can click the little plus person button up here and print this out and put it on flyers. I can share this in social media, on Facebook, and really start growing my community. Hi, Olya. So another neat thing to just know about being a host is this red X right here. Though we would never do it to them, if you tap that red X, it'll actually give you the control to remove the person and all of their posts from your pod. So the controls are super duper easy. You don't need a degree to be able to manage and keep a nice, healthy pod going. So I'm going to just come back over here and show you some other tricks that we can do with this pod as people are joining it. If I hold my finger right here, I have the join chat, which you've seen. I can share the pod, which you've seen, which allows me to grow my pod. I can tap members and see all the members of my pod. And this one's really neat. I can map my pod. Now, if I tap map my pod, it's going to zoom out and it's going to show me the profile location of everybody who's joined the pod. So we just launched this pod. So this pod has 3 people in it. And I can actually see geographically where people are, which is really exciting. Obviously, a pod or an organization that has 100,000 people would allow 100,000 people to connect all over the world. If you have an intimate pod like the one we just created, then we get to see where folks are. We can see that Olia's in Utah, Corbin's in Idaho. It looks like Dana's down here in Tennessee. And what's really neat is it'll show you in the list at the bottom all the people in this organization and how much you have in common with them. So Olia and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blue tags, which means we have 6 things in common with each other. And it's a great way for people in the movement to connect with each other, because what a great opportunity to send her a message if I tap that and reach out and say, hey, I see you share the same goals in the movement. We would be able to chat with one another. Now, coming back over here, let's take a look at a bigger pod. So this is just a general pod that I started called Music. And if I tap Map Pod, you're actually going to be able to see that there are hundreds of people already. This is only like a week or 2 old, and I think there's about 700 people in this pod. So if we go down here and let's say we go over New York, we can see that you could be walking around New York City and actually find other people who share the love of music. And you may have other things in common with them too. Like you can see here that Dave and I, not only do we have music, but we have funding in common. And you can see all of this. And if you tap Dave, we're going to get to see a little profile of his, which is kind of neat. It'll show me looks like he's somewhere in Queens. And if I bring his profile card up here, he's in the business networking pod. He's in the music pod, and he also joined pod support, which is kind of neat. I could actually, if I thought he was a good fit for one of our pods, for some reason, I could say, hi, Dave, why don't you join the MWM pod? And I can invite him too. So you can see we've kept this functionality really simple and easy to use. As far as where you appear on the map, you can choose to set your location live, and that might make sense. Let's say for real life networking at a convention. After all, this event might have been taking place at a real location. So hopefully at some point, if we can get to a post-COVID world, being able to zoom in, and actually Google has made, we're powered by Google Maps, you'd be able to see different floors that people are on. So I could share my live location, and these people actually are sharing their live location because they've got the green rings on. Or I can just go to a general profile location. And on that note, let me head over here to the, I actually want to try one more thing just for fun. I want to see if anybody in the music pod also has MWM as a tag. So you can actually search within your pods we have powerful search filter powered by Amazon. And you can see there are 2 people that are actually inside that music pod that also have MWM as a tag. So again, as these pods grow, the larger they get, the more powerful they become. You could find somebody within a large organization that shares your love of knitting and your love of STEM, that sort of thing. Seemingly unrelated things, but you never know. So, and then if I come back over here, you can see, let's make an announcement. I think CW had talked about many of these things, that you have announcements, and announcements basically go out to everyone. So for example, I made announcements, my friends in Manhattan were giving a chamber music concert, and I made announcements on their behalf. Everybody that was in the pod got a push notification about that, which was really neat. Like, you're not gonna get that from the very large social media sites. My phone vibrated, and I was told about a jobs fair from the STEM mentors. And that's really neat. That's a powerful thing if you're a host, because you can let everybody in the pod know about important things, internships, opportunities to just collaborate and speak with other mentors and connect organizations. I'll just quickly show down here, we have this discover area. You can kind of think of it as a work in progress, a search engine. It's growing all the time. Baskin Robbins has 31 flavors of ice cream, but we have over 2,000 pods. So I'm sure there's a pod that already that you can find that you like, whether you're into real estate, sports, STEM, fitness, and colleges use it. All sorts of people use it, and it's growing every day by leaps and bounds. Someday there will be millions of pods, just like there are millions of apps in the App Store. You could think of it like an app store, but for little communities that you can join. And you could sort them by newest rating and size. And if you remember when I created the pod, if you choose for your pod to be public, it will appear inside the discover area if that's what you want, versus if you were an enterprise trying to use it internally, you would want to go with one of our solutions that are more geared towards that. And then maybe let's just come over to the inbox. in the inboxes where your messages are going to appear, that you have private messages. So for example, if I come over to the MWM pod, I hold my finger on it, I'm able to get these settings. So long press to be able to get these settings, and I choose members. I could actually send a message to CW, and it's going to appear inside my inbox down here. And I find out what new messages we had. And I could say, CW, your presentation was great. And that's just an opportunity for us to stay connected on pod, which is really neat. Okay, so, and these are all I have private conversations going on with tons of people here in pod. There's Miguel, we talked to. Now let me just quickly go over the profile before I hand the mic back over. If you take a look at the profile, we kept it really, really simple. So it's not about, posting tons of multimedia as much as it's about collecting your interests. So you can see here, STEM, STEM Summit, networking, computer engineering. These are all tags that I've collected. They're like badges that represent me and the things that I'm interested in. And they make it really easy for people to connect to me. Because if somebody goes on the map, either within my pod or the map in general, and they type in chamber music, let's use something really specific, they're gonna be able to find me because I have that as a tag. And then you could put a permanent location. I was just playing around, but you could put Harrisburg, you can put Los Angeles, whatever you'd like. You can see here, I can describe myself a little bit, and I can also see that people have been viewing my profile and may be interested in reaching out to me. So a very powerful tool. I'll just end it on one more thing with the map. If I tap the X up here, I'll remove the filter for the music pod. So we won't just be looking at the map through the music pod, we'll just be looking at the general pod map. You can see here that if I type in, maybe education might be a fun one to type. You can see here that I can start zooming into the map and that there's already lots of people with education as a tag. And so we just want to zoom in here and we'll start to see people all over Florida. And these are all people that have education as a tag. So I can just tap here, very powerful. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Tutor Care. That's really interesting. So that's somebody we might want to reach out to. I'm not sure if we know her, but maybe not. Maybe that's a new connection through pod. So that's pod at an overview. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
I'll just jump in here. So I did see something come up on chat and Miguel answered it. Thank you very much. But the question was around having one per, is there only one pod per state for Million Women Mentors or anything? You're not limited to one pod per state, but I think what we want to try to do is have one official, this was in Miguel's answer, if there's any other questions around it. So we are going to work with the state leaders to facilitate setting up one MWM state pod for each of the leadership groups. And we already do have a pod set up for MWM leadership. So all of the state leaders, so that you all can join the community to share best practices or events or activities or things that are going on. So following the summit, Miguel and I and some of the other folks on the team will be having conversations with you all about get you activated on the MWM leadership pod, and then we can assist in setting up your state pods as well. Is anybody on the call right now that has some questions about anything related to state pods, MWM pods? How about anybody have any ideas for how you might use the pod platform to kind of promote the movement in your area? Remember to unmute. No questions? Nobody?
They're all downloading pod, CW.
I hope so. Well, would anyone care to share? Just jump on and care to share how you see you might be able to leverage the platform to grow your community, connect with other people who are passionate about mentoring.
Hi, this is Jennifer in Delaware. I'll jump in.
Thanks, Jennifer.
I could definitely see how this would be an easy way to connect our potential mentors with the girl serving organizations. That's something we've struggled with. We've had several outreach events where we've generated interest from both sides of the equation, but have not had an easy way to do the matchmaking. So I could definitely see how this would be valuable there. I did have one question about notifications. So does this work like Twitter, where you only see the notifications within the application unless you have your phone buzz at you and things like that?
No, by default, if you post an announcement, everybody who's in the pod will receive that notification, unless they manually turned it off, but I would think that would be the exception.
Okay, so it'll come up even if the app isn't open.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That's a great example. You know, just connecting mentors and organizations. Very, you know, simple, super great use case for how to use Pod. That would be a great one.
Yes. Hi, this is Maria from Maryland.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, similar to what Jennifer said, definitely connecting mentors to mentees, but also a great way to connect local interested parties in an activity they might want to participate in, but don't know how to engage.
Yeah.
So I know that has been a challenge for me, just getting and making people aware of opportunities. So I think this would be a great way to do that as well.
Yeah, that's another excellent example. Just, you know, getting all the right people into the community. So when you want to share the word, spread the word, you know, you have the influencers, the influentials in your community who can actually do something with that information. So thanks for that. That's great. Anybody else? Some ideas?
Well, it gives you a lot of flexibility, CW. I think that the ease with which you can create different aspects of your community at large or specific communities within the community is what makes it so, it gives you so many options and it's so quick and easy. Yep. And your ground game can be, it really revolutionizes the ground game because it allows people who share that geocentric piece of community that you were sharing about in your demonstration, showing those people and where they are in the area. So if you're looking to find local support, Pod is a great way to do that too. I mean, of course, it helps you manage the community you have, but I think how do you expand the community and find people who can help you in your movement and mission that are nearby? And Pod's such a great way to do that because it actually allows you to see that there are people who share your interests nearby. And I can imagine for mentors and mentees even as well, having that kind of support system, especially in areas where it's hard to find. It may be hard for some people to find people who can mentor or, you know, are inspirational, or organizations that are looking out for their interests in the areas that they live in.
Yeah, I think too, they're just looking at the chat, some questions coming up. There was one about sharing personal information. And again, that's all in your control to share or to not share. Mm-hmm. Location, you know, I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk a little bit more about location, the level to which you want to share your location is, again, up to you.
What you do, guys, just one thing that, and we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but I imagine there's some people here that maybe would like to try to use Pod to see how they could set it up. I noticed we've got Corbin on the call, we've got Miguel on the call. What's the best way for us to help people going forward? Like tomorrow, Thursday, they decide they want to try and set this up and they'd like to talk to us about what's the best strategy, what's the best way to do it.
Yeah, in terms of setting up, we're going to follow the summit to the participants and send them some information, you know, kind of the how-to, right? How to get started with Pod and set up pods. So a tutorial, if you will be shared. So you will have some reference material after this to get started. And we'll make sure that when we send those reference materials out, we give you some contact information. So if you want to be walked through the process, or you just want to talk to somebody about how the best way to go about doing that, we're happy to help. We have a whole team of folks who we can connect you with.
Yep. I think it's kind of neat thing about Pod too is that we won't go through all of the, you know, different ones, but if you tap Pod, the organization comes up with one tap of the finger. There's literally only this, but this is the most common thing people see in their lives. If you're like me, your phone's always within arm's reach, no matter where you go and what you do. And it's just like one tap of the finger and the organization's right there. I don't think you really get that with anything else, where it's just, you know, there's the community right there with one tap of the finger. And hopefully someday we're able to, hopefully someday we can get these pod tiles to go on the desktop. I mean, that's the dream right there. So at some point in the future, if your organization has a pod tile, I would love to make it so the widget can go on the user's desktop. So if it was Acme Company or you know, diversity and inclusion at Acme, you might actually be able to put that right there on your desktop outside of pod itself. So people's pods could sit on their desktop. So that's the way we think here at Pod, always trying to bring the user closer to your community.
You know, one thing I just want to add, just another suggestion idea, you know, as a marketing mentor myself, you know, I've been a career-long marketer. I'm very active in mentoring. I love the idea of having that immediate connection with mentees. Now, most of the people that I mentor have started their professional careers. They're early in their professional careers. So, you know, access to the app and whatnot is not an issue. But having that immediate connection where, you know, anytime, anywhere, if there's a connection, somebody can reach out and be like, hey, CW, you know, what do you think about this? Or I'm dealing with an issue or a question. But it really does increase the touch points and the engagement as a mentor that I can have with a mentee or a group of mentees. And also even start to create some community across and with the mentees themselves, right? Because they have some things in common. They're all, you know, entry-level marketing professionals who are, you know, finding their way through their career and figuring out, you know, next steps and learning and developing. So it does create community and engagement on multiple levels, which I think is really very, very powerful. We haven't talked a lot about those connections, but someone on the call mentioned the connection between mentors and mentees. And I just wanted to accentuate that because I think it's a very, very powerful tool for that.
Looks like Tanya's got a question for us.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. First of all, I set up the woman to woman, there's so many acronyms, Million Women Mentors Maryland pod, and it was very easy. So thank you for the walkthrough. I was
Cool. Well done.
doing. I had a quick, the question I have is, let's say we wanted to do a Million Women Mentors per county. Is there a way to associate it with the Million Women Mentors Maryland? I'm kind of envisioning it as like, is Million Women Mentors Maryland the umbrella and then there's pods underneath, or is it just another pod? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes great sense. Does somebody want to take that? I'm happy to answer it. I don't want to.
All right, go for it, CW.
Yeah, sure. So the way I think about this, it's kind of like our MWM leadership pod and then our MWM state pods, right? You kind of probably want everybody to ideally belong to all of them. That may not make sense from, you know, a state level, but if you have an MWM Maryland state pod and then you want to start some county pods, I would start the county pods. And then, you know, you just have to figure out who wants to or should, you know, be involved in those county level conversations. Some people may be involved in all the county level conversations, right? Because it makes sense for them to be involved in those conversations and vice versa. So really they all exist within the ecosystem as individual things. And then the level of connection or crossover is kind of up to you and the community on what they want to be engaged in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.